Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we embark on the third day of a 5-day program on the American Black male experience. We're noting the recent killing of Tyre Nichols and noting the long succession of Black people generally, but in particular, young Black men who are regularly killed by the police. Last night, as I was watching the news, there was a woman, psychiatrist, a Black woman named Amanda Calhoun from Yale, who was talking about the reverberative effects of a killing like Tyre Nichols and how that affects not only the family, but people of color around the United States. And data is showing that it affects the mental health of people of color around the world. So when we experience a death, it's a tragedy not only for those in direct proximity, but because of the media, the effects reverberate to whoever is watching, who themselves have experienced racism. I happen to be reading a book by Gabor Mate called The Myth of Normal, which is his new best-selling book. He's an extraordinary writer. He's a doctor. He was born in Hungary during the Nazi occupation as a Jewish child. So he himself has experienced racism much of his life. And just happened to be reading the chapter on the way that racial discrimination affects not only our mental health, but our physical health. And I thought I would just read a few statistics and data points so that we take in as we listen to these Black men today. And as we are talking with people of color around the world in our meta theme around apology, that racism matters. Racism has effects far beyond the incident that people are forced to endure. Gabor Mate makes the point that in America, it is traditional to destroy the Black body. It is heritage. While that destruction has been most blatantly evident in the lynch mob rampages of bygone eras and the unofficially sanctioned violence persisting to this day, like Tyre Nichols or George Floyd, it achieves more insidious and even more widespread effects through the direct imprint of racism on the body. Importantly, these effects show up in people's physiology as if programmed there from the start. Heart disease, diabetes, obesity, depression, substance abuse, school success deprivation, premature mortality, disabilities at retirement, and accelerated aging and memory loss all have social determinants in early life. Not surprisingly, Black people in the United States suffer more diabetes, obesity, and hypertension, along with life-threatening complications such as strokes, for which the risk is doubled. For example, a 45-year-old African-American man residing in the Southeast, that's the South, the traditional South, the Confederate South, has a stroke propensity of a 55-year-old white man in the same region, and a 65-year-old white man residing in the Midwest. There are race differentials in blood pressure rates as measured already in children and adolescents. For young children, being subordinated in their social milieu, whether family or classroom, around their race leads to heightened cardiovascular, nervous system, hormonal responses to stress, and higher risks of chronic medical conditions. This remains true when the children become adults. The suppression of individual authenticity through racism plays havoc with biology, breeding illness. James Baldwin once said that to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in rage almost all the time. The first problem, he said, is how to control that rage so that it won't destroy you. And this blew my mind, around birth, Black mothers are dying at 3 to 4 times the rate of non-Hispanic white mothers, and their infants are at least twice as likely to die as white babies. As one of the Harvard Medical School's professors said, for Black women, far more than white women, giving birth can amount to a death sentence. And this is what is extraordinary. Having a non-Black doctor doubles a Black baby's risk of dying. The baby's penalty, we might say, for the crime of being born Black. Biomarkers such as blood pressure, stress hormones, blood sugar indicators, inflammatory proteins, and lipids are measured. They are significantly higher in Blacks than whites, with Black women showing consistently higher scores than Black men. In both races, poor people scored higher than their economically advantaged counterparts, but non-poor Blacks had a greater probability of higher scores than poor whites. So when you add poverty to racism, it exacerbates all those biomarkers of stress that a person endures just by being Black. And when you add racism with poverty, with gender, you have a toxic mix that is deeply debilitating on not only the psycho-emotional, but physical health, particularly of the Black women and women of color. So I thought I would just bring this in since it just came fresh to my attention through the myth of normal and what I was watching on the news from Amanda Calhoun last night, to underscore everyone that when we're talking about racism, when we're talking about the death of someone like Tyre Nichols, we're talking about real events that reverberate through the mass collective psyche because of the media and reverberate through our somatic and psycho-emotional beings in ways that are deeply debilitating and endure over time. And so as we're talking today about American Black men who've made it through that thicket and are living lives of success and passion, let us honor them in a particularly profound way because their journey has been challenged far more than people who live without the scourge of racism. So in that spirit, let us just take a moment to just breathe together. We won't have the sound, but just take a minute and breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly. Close your eyes and feel the depth of what it means to be a racist and to be a victim of racism in our world. And beneath that and around that, open our hearts to compassion. Let us take 5 breaths together. Thank you, everyone. These are issues of great gravitas that we wrestle with on Humanity Rising, all within the spirit of how do we look reality right in the eye, inspire ourselves with a solution or an opportunity that emerges out of the crisis we examine, and thereby better ourselves, heal our communities, and bring inspiration to the world. And it's in that spirit that I want to welcome my good friend, Dr. Karoy Ferguson, who's convened this 5-day program on the Black male experience in America. He's brought a number of programs to Humanity Rising over the last several years as we've dealt with the issue of race and empathy and accountability. He's a clinical psychologist for, I think, over 35 years, and a tenured professor at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and a great leader, not only in his community, but in the Association of Humanistic Psychology as president or co-president. So Cuff, thank you so much for convening this program this week, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. And it's a pleasure to be with Humanity Rising once again, and to try to see if we can share some ideas, thoughts, experiences through the lenses of Black men. We have to do an acknowledgement up front so that at least if one is looking at the program, you may see some differences. 2 of our panelists, unfortunately, are unable to join us this morning, and they happen to be the 2 Reverend doctors that we were going to talk about in terms of sharing their passion and how their journeys. One had a family emergency and had to not be present today. And but that speaks volumes in and of itself. That is how important family is in our community, and how it takes precedence over everything else. The other person, I think, has some technical difficulties and isn't able to join us. Although I'm hoping that he might be able to pipe in at a certain point. Despite that, we do have 2 wonderful other guests with us, Art Johnson and Tony Benjamin. And I'll be introducing them after I say a few words. And I want you to indulge me for just a second to invite you into an exercise that I'd like the audience who are listening to engage in prior to us getting into a conversation. And this is an exercise that will only take about a minute, but it requires a certain kind of posture that you will take with yourself. So I'm going to ask people, for example, to be totally honest, completely honest with yourself. Those who are in the chat, I'm going to ask you not to share anything in the chat that you come up with. And thirdly, as a guideline, I want to ask you to not judge anything that comes to mind, not judge it, but let it flow out. So I want, if people have a pen and paper handy, I'd ask you to get a hold of it. And I simply want you to complete this sentence and allow whatever comes to you to come forward. Don't judge it in terms of whether or not it's positive or negative. Just let it come out, whatever it happens to be. And just do this for 1 minute. So this is the sentence that I want you to complete, and just allow whatever comes. Don't judge it, positive, negative. I'm not going to ask you to share it, but let it come forward. And the sentence that I want you to complete is this: Black men are. Black men are. Whatever comes to mind, for about a minute. Thank you, everyone. The reason for my asking you to do that is that I wanted you to get in touch with certain kind of thoughts that may be underneath, that may be floating there unconsciously. It has to do with things that we carry around as potential beliefs, self-limiting beliefs, those kind of thoughts that structure our experiences. Now, one of the interesting things about us as human beings is that we actually are very simple creatures on this tiny planet of free will that have created a very complex world. And actually, there's only one basic rule that governs our experience. And that one rule is that we create reality according to the nature of our beliefs. And beliefs can be self-limiting or they can be self-expanding. And out of that one basic rule, we've created monumental complexities, particularly as it regards race. And so that's just an exercise just to get in touch with things that may be floating around. And indeed, these things have reverberations both in terms of the atmosphere that we create, the cultures we create, the kind of experiences we have with one another. And so I just wanted to invite us into that way of thinking about things. So with that said, I'm going to introduce our two panelists, and as I do so, I want you to give some kudos to each one of them. The first panelist that, I want you to open your cameras when I introduce you, is one is Art Johnson. Art is a former instructor of ethnic studies, and he holds an MA in political science from the University of California in Berkeley. He's conducted also advanced graduate research in history on the history of consciousness programs at UC Santa Cruz, studying the dynamic implications of Hegel's master-slave relationship for the African-American experience. His early teaching experience in community resource development work was with public radio and public television. And this led to a decade-long career in the state-of-the-art global communication business. Currently, Art serves as CEO and Chief Learning Officer at New World Communications. And this is his own remote consulting practice and virtual enterprise, where he delivers timely and mission-critical transformation messages across generations, across genders, across communities, and indeed across market sectors across the planet. So welcome, Art.
Welcome, Cuff. This is a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be in this discussion.
And the other panelist that we have with us today is Tony Benjamin. And Tony is a nationally recognized entrepreneur who fosters positive dialogue that brings about progressive results on emerging initiatives. And interestingly, after a stint with the NFL Seattle Seahawks, he began his entrepreneurial endeavors in the 1980s. And he's held numerous consulting and leadership roles over the years. And some of these include, for example, owner of his own consulting firm, which was called Benjamin and Associates, executive director of an enterprise called Futurepreneurs Unlimited. He's been president of Youth Centric Center. He's been director of the CDCC with the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, president of Transport Safe Training Center, president of Certified Learning Systems, president of CD Express, financial consultant with Shearson Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner and Smith. And additionally, he served as program manager for Team Issacar Youth Mentors, which is a holistic development program for at-risk young men between the ages of 19 and 18. And he's done that since the organization's founding in 2011. And he serves on the board of directors of Mentor Washington, the mission of which is to promote, support, and expand quality mentoring that fosters positive youth development and academic success and job and career readiness in the Washington state. And he's participated in the Minority Business Executive Program at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. And he served as president of the program's Alumni Association and served on the board of trustees for the MBA program at Tuck. So I might add that he was also one of the tri-captains of the Duke University varsity football team. I think it was back in 1977, whereby he earned several All-American honors from his freshman through senior academic year at Duke. So welcome, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure and privilege to be here.
All right. So one of the things that we want to try to explore together in our conversation is just the whole notion of passion. Passion to make a difference, and how you kind of founded or uncovered your own kind of passion, and how did you go about doing it, and where has that led you? So I want to start the conversation with any kind of introductory remarks you want to make, and then and we'll take off from there. Art, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, what has really inspired me, even though with the presentation of the victimization of Black men and of Black people, what for me has been, that's been like in my family, a point of departure. And that what has impressed me is despite everything that has happened to African-American men and women, how we have passionately pursued a beautiful, awesome, life-changing, life-giving contribution to world history. Okay, and so that allows me, even when we have these terrible incidents that keep occurring, to see a bigger picture that is a whole lot different than just being a victim and just suffering. Okay, and one of the things that really got me in terms of, thank you for introducing me, is that I've been blessed. I've been blessed in a very, very wonderful family that's kind of historic in nature. Okay, even though I grew up primarily in what was called an integrated society, and mainly in, through the military, my father going to different places across the world, but settling in San Jose, California. I had two amazing parents who, even though I was born in Baltimore, but I didn't experience that completely segregated experience that they had as light-skinned African Americans, okay? And, but they always wanted to let me know where I came from. And so they attended Frederick Douglass High School, okay? My mother let me know that her second grade teacher was Mrs. Marshall, third grade Marshall's mother, okay? And some of the fans, and she knew these people that, came through this, Perrin Mitchell and all these people that were part of their history. My father was the first Black man, African American, we call themselves Negroes then, who went to Lincoln University and brought home Kwame Nkrumah during Christmas, because he didn't want to go back all the way back to Ghana. And his mother, he wanted to give some robes to him, and his mother said, "Don't you give away your robes, you better keep your robes." And my grandfather, who I was privileged enough to know, came from a sharecropper's family in near Richmond, Virginia, who got tired of his father abusing him, and at 12 years old decided to leave home. And before he knew it, he was in the Spanish-American War, because he walked into a hotel and saw this man with uniforms. He was like some kind of a porter or servant kind of person. And the guy looked at him and says, Sonny, do you like my uniform? Yes, sir, I do. He said, would you like to have a uniform kind of like this? Yes, sir. And before he knew it, he was on the ship serving the captain, and the captain would then have him row ashore and give him some money. So while the captain would go to the whorehouses and do whatever his thing was, he had this money to deal with. And because the people on the shore, on the boat said, if you're going to go, then go get us some rum. So what he would do is with that little bit of money, he'd buy barrels of rum, bottle it, and then bring it back, as an entrepreneur. Okay. And by that time, now from 12, the time he got older, he didn't like the military government. He didn't like the lack of freedom that he had. So when the ship came in near Baltimore, he jumped ship. He went AWOL to start his life, okay? And his life was no more than maybe a third, fourth grade education. And then he was a maitre d' at these white country clubs. Okay, and this is during the middle of the Depression. So he would bring home food in his pockets to feed his family. Okay, so with that kind of a heritage, and then on top of that, my father decided to become a doctor. He told me about going to what it was like to be at Lincoln University and to learn of Charles Drew, who was the father of blood transfusions, who got into an accident, who then could not get a transfusion because he couldn't get a transfusion at the hospital where he was on, the segregated hospital. So I had all of this stuff. My mom and father, during the, were, you want to call us the new Negroes or whatever. We also became Black and African-American. We adopted all of the different identities as we grew, and part of that. My mom became a really important African-American artist, Marie Johnson Calloway, who was just really neat. Even before that, her mother, who was a seamstress, she had come out of South Carolina and gone to a kind of a school for probably light-skinned African-American girls who learned how to be seamstress, and she then, late in her life, discovered she was an artist. So she started making this kind of Grandma Moses art out of bones and stuff, collected objects in her life. So for me, the source of the passion that I've had comes from the very depths of creation, okay? So what I was learned, even though I didn't have a very religious education, I always thought as somewhere related to my spirituality was my creativity. And then I started to realize that there was this God, the creator. And that, as I grew, I started to see something very interesting in the people in African-American history who were transformed by some kind of sense of something larger than themselves that was teaching them. So even though they might have been taught Christianity in some kind of way, with the white Jesus, Black people didn't look at that way. They saw Jesus as a liberator, as a if you look at a whole history of Black church, okay, it was a different thing, and the freedom songs and all of that were kind of couched as ways as, I'm going to leave Joshua at the Battle of Jericho, and all of these things were about liberation. And every moment in history has been a liberation moment. So for me to focus just on what just happened here or happens there or continues to happen, my discipline is to focus on what is positive and to expand the gifts of what I've been given by God, okay? And so for us to just kind of language on that. I think what we need to do is transform. We need not to forget, but we have to look at the sacrifices that we've made and everything in America. So many contributions have been made by Black men, okay, in such many ways, and in very, very creative ways. We couldn't speak in one way, we could speak in boxing. If we couldn't do it in one way, we did it in music. If we did it in drama, we did it in, okay, there's a whole gift to the evolution of world culture that's based on the contributions of Black men and Black women. So that's all I need to say. I just think that we need to take this another. We'll have further discussions, I'm sure, about media and how we mediate our own experience. But I'll stop for now, and I give the floor to somebody else.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna circle back to a number of the points that you were raising, and hopefully see if we have time to integrate actually some video clips around some things that you kind of raised. But I want to get Tony into this and for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Again, I'm really grateful to be part of this conversation, very important, not only at this time, but probably perpetually, as we discuss the impact of race. Just a little bit about my background as it pertains and hopefully is relevant to this discussion. My mother was 16 when I was birthed into the world. And my father was 20 at the time. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was 17 when she birthed my mother. So my mother chose to not go back to high school, somewhat out of shame, because it was a very small community on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so she did not want to deal with the shame of being a teenage mother by going back to school. So by that time, my father had gone to live with his grandmother in Cleveland, Ohio. My mother wanted to be with the 20-year-old man that she felt that she loved at that time. And my grandmother at 33 years old said, "You're not ready to take a baby with you. Leave the baby here." That ultimately was my great blessing. That, my grandmother at 33 and maternal grandfather at 34 years old, who had 2 teenage children of their own, made that choice and sacrifice for my benefit. So with the beginning of that journey, it was my grandmother also made an intentional choice, as we all have the ability, and our greatest power is our power of choice, right? So we're endowed with that. And so my grandmother then said to my grandfather, when they made that decision to take me, that they were going to turn in all their party, or at least my grandmother, she said, "I'm taking my party clothes down to Goodwill and I'm giving them away. I'm done partying. And you know what? I'm going to go join the church on Sunday and we're going to raise this boy in the church. And you're going to go with me," is what she told my grandfather. So they made an intentional choice to change their lifestyle, to break the cycle of generational poverty that had begun in the South, because my grandparents migrated from Alabama, South Carolina, Virginia as was the tradition at that time, coming out of the South to what they thought was an opportunity for economic participation in the industrial North, working in the coal mines and working in the steel mills of that era. As they learned, that was not indeed the case, that was offering an opportunity for economic participation through those means of employment. The other thing that Mr. Johnson referenced was the difference of and the perceptions of race as based upon skin color. In the steel mill environment, if you were dark-skinned, you automatically were assigned to the labor gang, which was the lowest form and compensation of employment. And if you were fair-skinned, you were assigned to a higher duty with higher compensation, which, since Pittsburgh is built all within the hills of the Allegheny Mountains, determined also where you were able to reside. The dark-skinned people lived down the hill, closer to the steel mill, and the smokestacks and the soot that came out of the smokestacks, where the fair-skinned Blacks were able to live further up the hill. And the Caucasians lived way away from the stacks of the steel mill. So growing up in this mixing pot, not a melting pot, because in this community of different types of European influences, we had in Monessen, again, Monessen, just a quick history, was on the Monongahela River. So it took the MON from Monongahela, and it envisioned itself to be a great steel city, such as Essen, Germany, the great steel city of Germany. So that's how my town, Monessen, was named. Since Monessen was built amongst the hills, I lived down the hill amongst the dark-skinned people, and the fair-skinned Blacks got to live further up the hill. But it was a mixing pot, where everybody kind of had their own colloquial groups that they resided amongst. So the benefit for me was that even though we were a minority, we were only 10% of the 20,000 population of that suburb of Pittsburgh. I still lived within a community of Black people. And I was heavily involved and raised in a Black church, traditional Baptist church. So I was able to, this had a great influence on my identity. It had a great influence on my beliefs, and I was encouraged. Number one, the most important thing that I received that has contributed to, as you may have heard, my journey and all the different forms of leadership that I've taken over time, it was because I was very simply loved. I was loved by my grandparents. I was loved by my mother. She was not present on a daily basis in my life, or my father present on a daily basis. But when they came to visit, I knew I was loved. And as a little chocolate boy, especially, which never had a Black teacher from kindergarten all the way through high school, it was necessary that I was loved and that I was encouraged, because I was not receiving any positive messaging from those teaching influences that I was being exposed to. So when the input that was coming from those influencers in the form of teachers, some coaches and others, when the input was not necessarily intended to encourage, my grandmother would say, remind me constantly, I love you. those very simple, powerful words. And she would also say, and God loves you. Most importantly, God loves you. So that kept me going. That gave me the power of understanding that I could overcome anything that might be positioned intentionally as an obstacle, or might be a unintentional disruptor to what I was created to achieve. I was taught to be, most importantly, from a leadership standpoint, a servant leader. That everything that I was made to do was for the benefit of others. Because of the people that were my community, my church community, the community that I grew up in, surrounded by other Black people in my neighborhoods, it was natural that my intention and the community that was my priority to serve was my Black community, because that's who I knew, and that's who fostered my growth and my confidence. So with that, I just wanted to give a little background, if anyone heard my resume, as why it seemed that I was the president of this or the leader of that. Very simply, the number one input into that was love. And I believe ultimately that's the number one solution to helping us have the confidence that we can overcome, which, with my grandfather, my paternal grandfather couldn't read, coming from the cotton fields of Alabama. But he was just my paternal grandparents lived just a mile or a mile and a half away from my maternal grandparents. So when I would go to my paternal grandparents' house, he bought every Jet magazine, every Ebony magazine. And he would have me sit down from the very first time that I could read, and he would say, "Tony, read this story to me." And so I would read those stories to my paternal grandfather. He bought every Pittsburgh Courier newspaper. He would say, "Tony, read these stories to me." So the net effect was, not only was I learning to read, but also I was learning to read about Black people that were progressive, Black people that were doing things all over the country, all over the world. And so that was another positive input into me. So these things are very powerful. In every leadership opportunity that I am led to, those are the types of behaviors that I emulate, being a servant leader to whatever environment that I'm in. I emulate providing positive inputs for those that I am led to serve, through positive content, through encouragement, and most of all, through genuine, authentic, heartfelt love. It doesn't matter what their skin color is, what their backgrounds are, or what their beliefs might be when they come into my presence. It is my power that I believe, my spiritual power, that is able to speak truth to them. And that's the truth that we are created for a purpose. And that purpose is eventually illuminated in such a way that ultimately we fulfill God's will for our existence on this earth. So I'm going to stop at that. And again, I'm hopefully extended some of the truth that Mr. Johnson was speaking, the truth that our other esteemed panelists, and that this series is promoted. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. There's such rich themes that are permeating throughout both of your conversations, and so I find myself wanting to go down several different paths here. I'm gonna start a little bit with the path though that Art you were alluding to, just to kind of flesh it out a little bit. And it has a lot to do, and I think Tony, you picked this up a little bit too, having to do with the skin color, and how that's dealt with both primarily from an external point of view, but I also want to push it a little bit and see what your experiences have been like from an internal Black community point of view as a Black male. For example, I just shared just a little bit of experience from my own little background around the internal stuff. I recall going to a family reunion at one point, and my father, my biological father, who I did not grow up with, but I got to know later on, and we formed a very close bond. He had a brother, call him Uncle John, and Uncle John was a minister. So we went to what was called the Ferguson Cooley family reunion. So I showed up, and Uncle John said to me, "Look, I want to show you something. Get in the car with me." So at the first reunion, the Ferguson Cooley family reunion, you know, there's all mixtures of different colorations, the skin color. They said, I want to get in the car. I want to take you someplace. Where he took me was to another Ferguson reunion. And Uncle John, you know what? You know how ministers can move in and out of everything within the Black community. Doesn't really matter what skin color you are, or whatever. And Uncle John happened to be darker skinned. Okay, so he took me to this other location, and I got out of the car, and he said, "I just wanted to show you this." And at that second family reunion, there was all of the light skin Fergusons. There wasn't a single darker skinned Ferguson at this particular reunion. And I just wanted to show you this. Now I'm able to mingle, but I want you to just witness what's going on internally with our community and with our family here. So when you grow up, and this is where I got the notion of being a bridger, what I call a bridger, and walking the path of a bridger. Said, I want you to use this experience to teach. And so I mingled among the light skinned, Fergusons, and I'm sort of like in the middle, kind of thing. And then I went back to the other family and mingled there too. And actually, I had a wonderful time at both. But that was some of the internal things that went on. So I was wondering if you all had any experiences internally, internal to the Black community, having to do with those kind of differentiations.
I've experienced, I had some really, I was so grateful that my grandmother at the very end of her life pulled me in and she said, there's something you need to know about your family. And my grandmother was very, very light skinned. And she said, you need to know about my father. Well, her father was a white man. His name was Gally Shaw. He was a lawyer in South Carolina. And he fell in love with my great grandmother, who I got a chance to meet. And she, from an external appearance, she was a cinnamon colored lady that was of African extraction and Native American extraction. And there was a caste society, just like there's classes and there are castes of people based on color, both within Baltimore, Maryland, where my parents grew up. And even though they were light skinned, they were part of an African American community. And so there were people, and my grandmother, even though she was dirt poor, she had other Black people who were darker skinned calling on her, Miss Kine, would you like to have some wood, or would you like to have some whatever? And so there was obviously a caste society that was in the Carolinas, okay? And that carried over even into the kind of churches that you went to. So some of the African Americans, we call them Negroes then, they can call themselves African Americans. Some of the Negroes that went there, the light skins would kind of move up into becoming Presbyterians, okay? And the dark and Black people would be like Baptists.
Baptist, yes.
And so there was all, there was all that stuff. And my grandfather, who kind of came, it was really, really nice. I got a chance to know my grandfather on my paternal grandfather and my maternal grandmother. And my dad would bring him back to California. And my grandfather was just full of poetry, and, he would give me, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the fruit. And, he would give me so much teaching through his poetry and so much stuff about his life. And one of the things that really kind of moved me in terms of his experience, because he was a light-skinned guy, but he grew up in segregated Baltimore and all that. But he had a transformation as he got older, maybe because his brain changed, but he got a message from God that said, you need to be a keeper of the animals. Okay, and I didn't quite understand that, but this was around Christmas time, and in front of our house, we had these pyracantha berries. And the pyracantha berries at that time of year became fermented. And then the birds would come and eat these berries and they would get drunk. So he was home observing this around Christmas time. And he looked outside and saw these birds just kind of all over. And he felt he was like Saint Francis of Assisi. So he went out into the lawn, and the birds would be right on his hands. He said, see, I'm the keeper of the animals. Well, what I got from this, now I sound like I'm going in a different kind of place, but there's such gifts of culture that I got from different people. I had a very dark-skinned uncle who was also a teacher of physics at San Francisco State University, okay? So I always had these people who I looked up to that were leaders in their own right, doing their thing, who understood and even went through. I had my first experience between the light skin, dark skin thing was on my own street. I had a friend down, there was one Black family at the end of my street, my friend Gregory, who I would play ping pong with all the time in high school. We were in high school together. But when we became teenagers, he went to a party that I was, and we had Black people, we had to kind of gather around. So if there was a party in Palo Alto or the Palo in somewhere else, the word got out that Black people were going to be moving there. But one day I discovered he went to a party and he didn't invite me. And he said to me, I didn't want, you got good hair. I had more hair then than I do now. You have good hair and you got light skin. And I don't want you to steal the girls. And that really hurt. That really, really hurt because, we had, this thing, but there was also a class distinction. My father was a doctor. His father was a postman, okay? And so there was a class thing even there kind of where we were, in terms of even between us. But for me, I've never been black enough or white enough. You know what I'm saying? But I had to be enough of myself. And that has been a really liberating experience, okay? To say, okay, I choose to affirm who I am and to understand how blessed I am. And because I think what Tony and I have in common is a whole lot of love in our family. Love is so important. I was deeply loved all the way through my entire life. And that insulated me to anywhere I went because I was affirmed. I was self-affirmed. I was taught that I had the ability to do anything that I needed to become. And I carried that forth. And I carry it forth with me now. And I teach that to my children and to my grandchildren who are expressing that. So I'm so proud because they got it, and they're giving it. And I think that's the message that goes beyond just the gift of Black people. This is a gift to all humanity. If Black people, with all of the things that have happened to us, all of the things that we've done, the kind of amazing contributions that we've made in every area of life, okay, that is worth celebrating. And that is the defense, that is the healing that we need in America and in the world. Okay, so I'm passionate. I'm on fire today, okay? Because I've been given this gift of knowledge, and then you go deeper. So I say, well, wait a minute, I got to maybe learn more about God and all that. And so at age 50, I was going through an ageist experience. And it's not just being Black. Sometimes when you're old, they don't want to deal with you as well as that. So a friend of mine gave me a book from Ernest Holmes that said about my invisible power, and that said, you are a member of God and company, and that you have a silent partner that you can always, you can log into. And that has just promoted me into such a beautiful way. And then as I go into thinking about the planet, and the message, I am so grateful for every breath that I have remaining on this planet Earth, because it's all God-given, the earth, the nature. And if we can learn from that, we can turn this around for love of ourselves, for love of the planet, and love of life itself, to affirm that. And we've got to do that now, because it goes bigger than just racism. The races have to work together. Across generations, across genders, across the planet, we need to come together as humanity to deal with our sustainability and with life itself. So anyway, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, I raised that other issue because it's also part of like shedding shackles, which is like the theme. And basically, the skin tones have been one of the shackles, how we perceive and deal with it. It's been both a shackle from an external point of view, as well as from an internal community point of view, Black community point of view. And to the extent to which we're able to shed that and move forward in the spirit of love, supported by and sustained by loving families and loving community, because I think all three of us probably could say that our families were the sustaining forces that inspired our inner passion to continue to move forward. You got love. And I say, for example, that the three women who were the most loving folks that I've ever experienced in my life were the folks that I grew with: my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. We all lived in the same household, an extended family. And that was an important thing to do. I want to another little theme, and it has to do with because both of you have mentioned the role of the Black church in your experience, and how that has inspired one to get in touch with their passion. But there's also a shackle that's contained in that too. So I want to have Jim to play something for us, and then we'll see if we can respond to that. Jim, do you have that? What color is Jesus?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up here. Hold on.
Okay.
Was Jesus? What color?
Black.
Black? What color was he? Jesus was a human. If you're a Christian, you believe that he was the second son of the Blessed Trinity. He was the Son of God. He was divine, but he was expressed in his 33 years on earth as a human being. And now coming forward are not a few very, very active people to say that the presentation of a white Jesus down through history before people of color has served to characterize the Caucasian as superior, as the best, as better than others. And more than that, has perpetuated a lie on the people of color and continued their enslavement.
That's right.
Here's who's here. Blair Underwood joins us from L.A. Law. Pow! Blair needs no lecture on this. A lot of black folks don't go for this black Jesus at all. Been praying to a white Jesus all their lives. This is their Jesus. And no activist of the moment is going to come along and rip that imagery out of their soul. And they're just as proud of their blackness as anybody else. It doesn't have to do with all this psychological stuff that you newfangled people keep bringing out. Blair Underwood has produced it's misleading to call it a movie. It's a 30-minute short film. Yeah, a 30-minute film in which he plays Jesus. Let me show you just a piece of that, Blair, and then we'll gab here a little bit. Jesus, this is the crucifixion. This is right at the beginning of the film. Just a moment to show you. Watch.
It is finished.
Here is the beginning of the film, titled The Second Coming, which was written, produced, and as you see, starred in by Blair Underwood. You should also know, without giving the story of this film away, that the historical Jesus then appears in your film as a contemporary black male.
Right.
Who is in a mental institution, and they're scared to death of this guy. And, I mean, almost to the point where, you know, they're just beating him down. Did the Rodney King thing inspire you?
Oh, most definitely. I've been very outspoken about things that I have dealt with the Los Angeles Police Department. Friends of mine, young African-American males with the so-called justice system. And when the Rodney King, the first verdict came out a year ago, it hit me. I said, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a so-called celebrity. It doesn't matter if you're Rodney King. Even Christ if he were a man of color were to come back, he would be treated the same way. So in the film, that's why he's accused of this heinous crime without giving too much of it away. But I need to make the point before we get into this, because this can get very heated as it has before.
Well, I don't know. We got a pretty thoughtful audience here. You know, they will offer their own insightful, civilly structured commentary here in just a moment.
But it's important for people to realize that this film is not about dividing people. This audience has seen the film. It's about understanding. It's about enlightenment. It's about what this man, Jesus, whatever he looked like, what he taught, his philosophy of love. But we're dealing with this historical figure.
Yes, we are. What color was he, Blair, in your own... You are a Christian?
Yes, I am.
You were raised a Christian?
Yes.
And, you know, this is not an investigation, but, I mean, was it, you better get to church or Mama's going to have to know why? I don't know.
It was pretty much like that, yeah.
All right, so that you... was it Baptist?
Baptist.
All right, so you sang all those hymns to Jesus, and I'm sure that Jesus, throughout your childhood, was white. Is that so?
That's correct, but we were always told that he was a man of color. Before we get into it, you have to understand what is black. What is blackness? Blackness is one of three things. It's either a perception, what you see. When you look at me, Phil, you see a man of a darker hue. It's either a state of mind, a consciousness. That's why I have friends of mine who are white, and you'll say, and they know more about African-American heritage and culture than some black people. And you'll say, well, this white guy, he's black. He's a brother. Thirdly, when we talk about blackness, it's defined by your ancestral lineage, your genealogical line. If you go to the genealogical line of Jesus, there are people of color throughout his lineage completely. And the thing is, before anybody can take issue with this film or with this entire issue, and it's not a novel idea, the significance of this film is it's never been on camera. A black Jesus has never been on camera. Right. Certainly not a crucifixion. So it's been there. And it's important to establish that because of all the things you said. We talked about the justice system. Well, but once we get beyond that, then, and only then, it becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand your position here, Blair. You do seem to be finessing a bit. The color is a matter of the heart, and you're right, there are white people who have been so very, very exemplary in their continued effort to ensure that the civil rights of all people are protected, that people of color, minorities, have started to refer to them as brother or sister. Great, great. But they're still white. I think you are suggesting that there's some pretty good historical anthropological evidence suggesting that Jesus just probably was black. Am I correctly stating your...
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
In that...
Was he a Jewish black guy?
There's no question. We're talking about a Jewish man from Jerusalem who more than likely, there were no camcorders or Polaroid cameras then, but more than likely had to have been a man of color. We're talking about probabilities.
Are you there, caller?
Yes, Phil.
You stop it there.
When God said he was going to make man and...
Okay. Thank you. So I just wanted to get your reactions to that. Now, this is a conversation that took place 30 years ago on the Donahue show. And I know that we all grew up kind of in the Christian tradition. And so I just was curious about how you react to that, because there are ways in which we get inspired beyond just the physical manifestation of things in terms of getting in touch with our passion. So how do you respond to that particular conversation? Now, our ministers are not here, which is one of the things that I wanted to have them present for. So we're going to do this from a semi-secular point of view. Sure.
Well, if I may, again, this is such a rich conversation. And each day I search for guidance. I believe very strongly in God. I believe very strongly in the presence, the perpetual presence of God in my life. And so it's ironic that this morning, again, what we consume has a large influence on what we become. If we consume negative input, then eventually it is going to create a strong sense of negative being within ourselves. So each day, I try to start each day with consuming positive input, empowering input. And I find that through the Daily Bread, which is a Bible-influenced daily writing. And ironically, the title of today's Daily Bread was "The Purpose of Life." And I was like, oh my, that's really coincidental to the panel that I'm going to be participating in. And the scriptural reference is John 18:37, where Jesus is quoted as saying, when Pilate asked him, and Pilate was a ruler of that time, what are you here? What are you doing here? What are are you declaring yourself as a king? And Jesus's response was in John 18:37, "To this end I was born, and for this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth." That was his response to Pilate, that I should bear witness unto the truth. And so as it goes on elaborating, that, it leads me to this, ultimately in today's Daily Bread, it confirmed my ability to be empowered. And according to, when I Google empowerment, it says authority or power given to someone to do something. The process of becoming stronger and more confident, especially in controlling one's life and claiming one's rights. And so on a daily basis, as I seek to gradually become more and more empowered, I am fed by these positive messages, which contributes to my ability to love, contributes to my ability to lead, which contributes to my ability to carry on that tradition of bearing witness to the truth. Now, I understand that some may say that truth is lies within one's own perspective. In other words, their view. Do we have the power to overcome what our senses are feeding us, which sometimes can be very misleading? What our eyes see, what our ears hear, what our nose smells, and what I may interpret that comes out of my ability to interpret what comes out of your mouth into, is that actually what you meant? Is that actually what you felt? Is that what actually came from your heart? All of these things can be misleading. So it is within me, when I search my own heart, that I have to use that as the sieve. I have to search my own heart to discern and ask for the power of discernment, so that I could live my life from a position of faith, that I was created, I am empowered. When I worked at the Urban League for those 11 years specifically, the ongoing theme was, I am empowered. That's what the Urban League, the words that the Urban League was bringing forth to encourage the people that they largely serve, Black people, to try to encourage Black people that despite all of these things that may appear to want to victimize us, to hold us down, realize that within yourself, you are empowered. And if that is what you adopt as the purpose of your life, to know that you are empowered and therefore you can extend that to others, then we can't be a victim, right? It is impossible for us to be a victim if we know that we are empowered. So I want to stop there. I know as it applies to whether Jesus was Black or white, from a DNA or looking at the genial, I'm sorry, I can't get that word correct.
Yeah, I
but,
got you. We got you.
yeah, but looking at it from that standpoint, we would have to say just looking at where he was located, looking at his Jewish religion, that it is not likely that he was Caucasian, pure white. That is not likely. And so, but in the broad scheme of things, what Jesus, as the Son of God, was on earth for, his purpose was not along those lines. His purpose was to bear witness to the truth. I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, what you're raising also, and I get Art into this, is when we get in touch with our purpose. It's interesting because I'm writing this book about living in synchronicity, and so you just had a synchronicity experience.
Mhm.
When you get in touch with your purpose, it's an empowering experience.
Yeah.
And it then fuels your passion for
Mhm.
your work in the world. And when you're not in touch with your purpose, or you obscure your purpose, then you disempower yourself. And as Black men, we always need to be in touch with our purpose.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Art, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I was thinking about that conversation. It was 1993.
Right.
And I want to bring in the whole idea of conscious evolution and the impact of what we're learning about the nature of our reality. And what's come into my idea is, particularly as I've been influenced by media and things like that. But one of the things that really met with me was the idea of that God is a divine intelligence that has expression in different races and in different people, that we're all individualized expression of the one God, okay? And I look at Jesus, I come out of a New Thought church kind of idea that looked at Jesus as a enlightened person, okay? But in the references, the way they look at the Bible, they say, yes, but you have the same power that I have. You just don't know about it yet. You haven't, Jesus's message was, if you want God has given you your kingdom, but you need to learn how to get to this place in your mindset to realize your power. Okay. And so happens, some of the New Thought people that really have moved my life is Ernest Holmes, who kind of studied all these different religions. He was taken up there. I think what's going on in the world, I believe that consciousness itself is evolving, that we're taken up in the expression of different ways of thinking about our lives, okay? And one of that has been the conversations, well, who was really Jesus? Was he Black? Was he blah, 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 blah? Okay, but that's just an evolution of thought, okay? It's not the whole end. And when you look at quantum physics and you say, hey, when we look at the universe, it's not enough to say that the way we evolved was random, and that we're suspect about what we call natural selection, because of the whole racism that said, okay, you've evolved, you're so great as white people because you've done this and this and this. I think right now, what we're learning in the world is there's this divine intelligence that we're all a part of, and it is not separate from us, but is at our very center of our being, okay? And so the way that we express ourselves is all part of a plan of learning. That's why I'm an educator. That's why I believe in communications like this. This is very important because, Jim is bringing all these different points of view here, and then people form idea of a greater sense of self than if they just didn't have this kind of learning and this kind of expression of people, you know, talking about what they see. So I believe that, I mean, the conversation is okay, but I don't even bring that conversation in, you know, because I don't, even though I call myself a kind of a Christian, I don't see Jesus as so divine that I'm not, okay? And I don't see that God is somewhere different. God is in my every breath. God created me, okay? I am so grateful for every breath that I have, because spirit is at the very center of my being, closer than my own breath. And so therefore, if I could learn how to align with that power, okay, the very sources of creation, okay, if I can tap into the law of infinite supply and then share that learning with other people, okay, then I will feel very, very good about my life. If I can leave that as a legacy to say, and my children, you say, well, look, there's granddad, or look at him talking, blah, blah, blah. He left me an idea of my life that is so big and is so beautiful. So, you know, so divine that I just need to keep on learning and doing that in my own life and giving of my love, you know, the gift of love. And I think what it is that I've learned is we haven't understand who we are, so we haven't accepted our power yet. We haven't learned about our power. Yeah. Okay. And educators, educators and mentors like Tony. Tony is my dear friend. Tony and I have these amazing conversations. There's not a time that we get on the phone that we don't cover the whole idea of our faith and our beauty together. I mean, I found him, discovered he was a learning person, trying, you know, dealing with these trucker associations and stuff, and now he's dealing with young men. And it's been such a gift to know him, because I get so much from Tony, and I think Tony gets some things from me, different people, but we are both on the same plane about the need for total transformation of consciousness, which has to do with the transformation of our society and economic participation. Okay, so I just think that it's a good news. It's good news that I met Tony. He's been a blessing in my life, and you too, Cuff. I just have met you, but the fact that you're convening us in such a way to express your humanity, Cuff, and our humanity, and to share our gifts with the world. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
If I may, just very briefly. Thank you. You know, we either are going to live by faith or in fear. And you know, this whole process of empowerment enables us to look more deeply. The things that aren't just shared may be very difficult to wrap our minds around because they're not part of what our five senses are consume. You know, if we don't see it, many times we don't believe it. We don't even believe that it exists because we don't see it. But the common sense should speak to us, of which there's a lot, you know, missing in terms of common sense, is that our life didn't just start in this physical world and it doesn't end in this physical world, which gives me, I'll just speak personally, for me to live in a state of perpetual hope. It enables me to look beyond my short physical stint on this earth. I mean, very, very, very short physical stint on this earth, to something that is more permanent, which is sometimes referred to as eternal. Much of the Greek mythology, because I deal a lot with the opportunity and how the artists way back in, 4 centuries before Christ was born, portrayed opportunity. And if you look at that portrayal of opportunity, the statue and the painting, there are a number of elements that tell us that even then, before Christ was born, humanity had a sense that there was there was something more permanent and a higher power that we were that we were responsible to. Because that portrayal of opportunity, he's looking to the left, and he's moving from right to left. Wings on his back, wings on his feet, and he's moving from right to left, which is different than the way we typically portray progress and movement. We're moving from left to right. Also, some of the other main features of that statue portraying opportunity is that his head is turned looking forward into the distance. And the artist was saying at that time that he is, and it's a very fixed glare, because he is looking to the eternal. He's looking to something very purposeful that he is moving toward. And then finally, he has a scale in one hand, and he has a sickle or a scythe in his other hand. And the scales are balanced in the sense that they are leaning toward the eternal. So there's a lot of faith. There's a lot that is being portrayed as it pertains to our focus on what is opportunity. Where does opportunity lie for us? I'm going to stop there and say that what I'm doing right now with our Conscious CEO that is oriented toward youth. Conscious is my attempt to lead young people to be able to look to the eternal, to look at opportunity, not within opportunity is not found within what's trending, but because that's where the crowds go. Opportunity is always going a different direction, but you can find opportunity, or you can discover and identify opportunity as based upon if you get outside of what is trending and identify what is more oriented toward the eternal. Empowerment, it's called the Conscious CEO program, meaning that you are empowered. Its CEO stands for Chief Empowerment Official, meaning that you are empowered. You have this ability to and wake up to this ability that you have to be able to make an impact, but have that impact be rooted in your heart. Within the O, we have it starts with my heart. It starts with my heart. Your Chief Empowerment Official status starts with your heart. And if you look to the eternal, rooted in love, you will attract opportunity. And with that being oriented toward servant leadership toward others, everything that you do will prosper. Everything will prosper. It is just a universal truth, in fact. So I'm gonna stop right there. I know our time, I again appreciate it. I appreciate all the wisdom that has been shared. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Tony. And it's probably a good note to bring Jim back in. I was going to share another little clip, but it is actually flows from what you were just saying about empowerment and getting in touch with that. The clip that we were going to show was a clip having to do with Reginald Lewis, who's founded the first Black billionaire business in America, in the United States. So here's someone who got in touch with a passion, got in touch with empowerment, self-empowerment, moved it forward, and created a billionaire business.
Amazing.
So we were going to share a little clip around that, but in the interest of time, we're just going to end because you brought us to a point where we need to be, which is that being in touch with your passion, being in touch with that inner spirit, and allowing yourself to move beyond just our five senses will indeed lead us to the evolution of consciousness that Art is talking about.
Yes, sir.
Jim, you wanna come back in?
Yeah, well, thank you all so much. This has been very powerful to listen to you both, Art and Tony, speak with such fervor about what animates you and the passion that you've embodied your whole lives. And I just wanted to note that both of you have similar backgrounds in the sense that you were both intensely loved.
Mhm.
Yes.
You know, and if someone's loved when they're young, that gives them a strength that can endure almost anything.
Sir.
So I just want to acknowledge the love that your parents and your grandparents gave to all of you, and you too, Cuff. Yeah, it's one of the common themes of your narratives today. I also just want to bring in to the Phil Donahue clip. Not only was Jesus not white, he was a Jew, he was Semitic, he was non-Caucasian. That's not even a controversy.
Right.
But the greater point is the entire inherited tradition of humankind. If you take the great religions, the five great religions, Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, all of them were developed by people of color. But the fact is, the Caucasians have never developed a great religion. They inherited the religion after it was fully formed. So, I mean, just to make a comment, to state the obvious.
Thanks for bringing that in.
Well, that's very insightful. That is great.
So, yeah. And, you know, I'm Caucasian, obviously. I have an ancestry from Sicily and from southern France, but we came in after the show was basically over. We had other talents, but it wasn't in the religious domain. No, that was an inherited characteristics that we refined. So I just thought I would just bring that in and comment. But Cuff, why don't you, as we close, any final comment you want to make, and then why don't you tell us what we have in store for tomorrow?
Yes. Well, thank you for bringing all that in. The last comment about the great religions being founded by folks of color, and it's not accidental, for example, that that African Americans on this continent, the culture got cast as soul, a soul culture. We use the terminology soul. That's not an accidental thing, because we had to stay close to spirit through all of this turmoil. So tomorrow, what we're going to do is to use another lens to talk with Black men. Up to this point, we've been using various lenses to have these conversations. We started off with the lens of self-identification and self-determination. Then we used a lens of talking about greater issues through social, personal, and global dynamics. And today we were using the lens of passion to have a conversation. Tomorrow we're going to use the lens of the educational journeys of some Black men, and we're going to frame it with some men who graduated from a particular college, which is Bowdoin College. It also happens to be the college I graduated from. But they've founded the first inaugural Bowdoin College Black Alumni Association. But we all got there in different ways. And our journeys to that experience were quite different. And our journeys also, while we were on the campus, was also quite different. So we want to have a conversation with them about what their journeys using the lens of education is all about. So that's what we're going to try to do tomorrow.
Thank you, Cuff. Thank you, Art. Thank you, Tony. I'm delighted, by the way, to say that Art is part of our doctoral program. He and I met a couple of months ago, and so I'm doubly delighted, Art, that you've been able to join the program today. So thank you. And Tony, next time I want to hear about your football career. As a 49er fan, we always are interested in the Seahawks one way or the other.
Yes, sir. Would love to have further discussion with you. Thank you.
And Jim, I want to thank you for your contributions to world peace and your concern for what's happening right now in the world and the planet. We've been listening to you talking about Ukraine and also your extensive investigation and experience of this, what's happening to our planet.
Yeah.
And I just see us going beyond just the mere talk. I mean, the reason why I'm involved with climate action is because I think we're all included. And so therefore we can maybe resolve some things with racism, with gender, with generation differences by all coming together for a greater good, which it has to do with our very survival. So I want to, put that pitch in there because I think what I see the need of doing is creating an amazing climate action consortium of all these separate different groups that are, have their own issues. But it's a huge opportunity. As an entrepreneur, I see the fact that all these things are happening right now, the transformation is an opportunity for all of us to grow personally and maybe even economically. So
very good point. Thank you.
So I want to put it in a broader context than that, because I think God is calling me to express myself in that kind of a way, beyond just the concern for my ego, what happened to me in my life. It's more important to the life of the planet and the life of all humanity and a species life. 70% of it is gone now. So anyway, I just want to put that into the perspective, the opportunity of being on stage right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Climate is the great leveler.
Right. Yes.
That brings us to a close for today, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box, and we'll then see everybody tomorrow for our 4th of 5 sessions on the matter of the American Black male experience. Thank you all so much. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.
Thank you, Art and Tony.
Thank you. Bye.